Hey everybody, this is the CER writing guide for the Two Rocks CER Practice Assessment. And as we talked about in class, the actual CER assessment will be very similar to this. It's going to still have the two rocks, it's still going to have the same types of data, but what you really need to look out for is this data here. This is what can easily change. Maybe I'll change some, maybe I'll change it all. You have to be able to decipher the information. Now, as always, make sure you read the prompt and look carefully at the data table. Use the information to write complete and accurate claims. Look at the evidence. Make sure your evidence is accurate. Make sure it's based on your data table. Don't make it up yourself. Double check to make sure the numbers are there and make sure the labels are there. And make sure your reasoning statement has all the key parts, and we'll review those in a little bit. So, here's the premise of this CER. A student found two rocks and would like to figure out if they are the same type of rock or different types of rocks. Below is a table with some information about the rocks and the scientific principles you may use to complete your statement. So what you're going to do is you're going to use the information in this data table, and you're going to use these 4 scientific principles to write your CER. And what you're trying to answer is this question right here. Are rock number 1 and rock number 2 the same type of rock? So when we look at this, some of you might be able to look at it and say, ooh, I know they are the same, or ooh, I know they're not the same. But if you're a little confused and you're not sure, what I would suggest you do is you look at the scientific principles. So for example, 1, a property such as density is a unique characteristic that helps identify a substance and distinguish one substance from another. Well, density is up here, and it's a unique characteristic and helps to identify a substance. So this is pretty important. And right now, they look a little different. So I'm starting to lean towards, well, maybe they're not the same, but mass is the same. Let's see. Solubility is the ability. What? Solubility? I don't even see solubility up here. So sometimes you'll get ones like this, and what I would suggest you do is I would suggest you highlight it, and what I like to do is strike it through. That way you're not going to accidentally use it. Solubility, well, this statement is true, has nothing to do with the CER because it's not up here at all. So hardness and melting point. Well, here's hardness, here's melting point. So those two are being used. Let's see what it says. They're both properties of a substance. Well, that's true. Big deal. Who cares? Well, but read on. Melting point is the temperature at which a solid substance starts to become a liquid. Melting point and hardness are unique characteristics and can be used to identify a substance. Bingo, that's it. Melting point and hardness are unique characteristics that can be used to help identify a substance. And look, they're different. That's huge. So density is a unique characteristic. So is melting point and hardness, and they're all different. So more than likely, they're not the same. But wait, mass is the same. How can that be? Well, read on. Mass and or volume are unique characteristics of a substance that can't be used to identify a substance. Now, does that make sense for you? What happens if one of the rocks, or if the two rocks happen to be the exact same size? They could have the same mass. It's like having, 2 candy bars that have the exact same mass, but they're different candy bars. They're not the same just because they have the same mass. That wouldn't make any sense. But these other things are huge. The scientific principles number 1 and 3 confirm that rock number 2 and rock number 1 are not the same. So let's write our claim. So your claim might be as simple as this. Rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks. All I did was take this, I copied and pasted it down here, and I just got rid of the R, made this a capital R here, the word R, then I made this a capital R, and I just said are different types of rocks. That's it. There's my claim. Now, we have to have an opportunity to be advanced. This is what an advanced claim might look like. Rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have different physical properties, hardness, density, and melting point. So that little bit beyond jumps the proficient CER into an advanced CER. So now we have to have evidence, and your evidence has to come from here. Every once in a while, I'll have students just make up evidence. or they'll use like kind of like reasoning and their real life experience as evidence. No. In science, you want to base, and especially in a CER, you want to base your evidence on the evidence and the data that is given. So this information is where you should be pulling your evidence. So when I look at it, the first thing I say, and I rewrote this here, rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have different physical properties. That's just me copying this right down here. So now, how can we prove that? How can we prove that they're different? Well, rock number 1 has a hardness of 7, and rock number 2 has a hardness of 4. Rock number 1 has a density of 6.25 grams per cubic centimeter, and rock number 2 has a density of 8.96 grams per cubic centimeter. Rock number 1 has a melting point of 4,500 degrees Celsius, and rock number 2 has a melting point of 2,576 degrees Celsius. Now, did you see I pulled all those numbers from here? In fact, when it comes to like having this superscript right here, I just copied and pasted it down there, and I put it in a sentence. Now, I don't have mass here for evidence, but I don't really need mass for a proficient. All I'm trying to do is prove that they're not the same. And these 3 pieces of evidence, and you have to have all of them, don't just have one to be proficient. You need to have them all relevant information. Now, if I want to pull my evidence to advance, what I would need to do is I would need to talk about the mass. And I might say something, I'd have these 3 right here. Then I would say something like, even though rock number 1 and rock number 2 have the same mass of 423 grams, mass does not help to identify a rock. And we learned that from this right here, the scientific principle right here. So that's that subtle difference between proficient and advanced. Now, comes the hard part, the reasoning. These are the 4 parts you need in the reasoning. You need to restate your claim. You need to list the scientific principle or principles. In this case, we're using 2, right? We need to list them. Here's the hardest part that a lot of students miss. You have to explain why these scientific principles can connect your evidence to the claim, and then have a conclusion. So here's my reasoning. Rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rock. Okay, that's my claim. Scientific principle number 1, SP number 1, states a property such as density is a unique characteristic that helps identify a substance and distinguish one substance from another. So all I did was I went up here and I copied and pasted that in. Now I had to add a little bit to it. I said scientific principle number 1 states. Then I put comma. You can have quotes on here so to know we quoted it. You can say SP, you can shorten this to be SP number 1 states that. And then go ahead and list it. You do have to have the scientific principle. That's number 2 here. Now here's the key part, and it's in blue. Why does this scientific principle matter? Well, rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have different properties. And I put density. You could have said rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have different densities. Bingo. Now, you still have to have one more scientific principle. If you miss one and don't have the other one, you won't be proficient on the test. You won't get a proficient grade because you have to have all relevant scientific principles. And number 3 is also relevant. It says that hardness, now notice how I shortened it up. I probably should have had a pound sign in there. Scientific principle number 3 states hardness and melting point are both properties of a substance. Melting point is the temperature in which a solid starts to become a liquid. Melting point and hardness are unique characteristics that can be used to identify a substance. So all I did was copy and paste up above, put it right here. Notice I put these things in here. These are the bling bling that draws my attention to your CER. It says, hey, here is scientific principle number 3. It's right here. Look at it. It's right here. That way, if I don't have to wonder, did you have it? Did you not? Did you reword it? Right there it is. Draws my eyes right to it. Now for the hard part. Why does this scientific principle matter? How does it link the evidence to the claim? Well, rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have different physical properties, such as hardness and melting point. Now, could you have just said rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have a different hardness and melting point? Absolutely. Absolutely. So those are the two key scientific principles you need. Now, what's your conclusionary statement? Therefore, rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rock. I'm fine with that. You can add to it because they have different physical properties, such as hardness, density, and melting point. And that's all you would need to have a proficient reasoning. Now, if you want to move your reasoning into the advanced area, you're going to write the same stuff, except you're just going to add a lot more to it. So, for example, you're going to put a lot more of your numbers in there and your data in there. So everything's the same, except now all of a sudden I've included right here all this information about the actual densities. Same thing for a scientific principle number 3. Notice how I started to put in the numbers here. I put in the melting points. Right up here, I put in the actual data for the hardnesses. And I also included scientific principle number 4. Remember, it has to do with mass. Now, does mass matter? No. But in this case, I specifically say scientific principle number 4 states that mass does not matter, and I'm pointing it out. And then you have your conclusionary statement. So I'm hoping that you're not going to have to use this review video to retake the test, but I'm hoping that you're using this review video to, 1, prepare for the actual test. But in the event you don't do well in a test, this video will guide you through what your practice CER should be. And the actual test is going to be very, very similar to this. It's still going to have mass, hardness, density, melting point, but I may just be able to change the data around a bit. So good luck going through this. Good luck retaking the test if that's what you need this video for. Thanks.